Okay, hi everyone. Today we're going to look at a few questions from a couple CSEC past papers. And to begin, I'm also going to add a few questions related to logistics as requested in our last session. Alright, so my first question created was explain the difference between supply chain and logistics. Now we know that supply chain is a system which includes people, organizations, and activities. And basically, that system is all about producing and delivering the product from the beginning stage where you source the raw materials, right down to the final delivery to your end users, which will be your customers or consumers. Logistics, on the other hand, looks at more planning and executing the transporting and the storage of those goods from the origin, meaning from the source of the raw material or creator of that raw material, to another business that may use that material to create a product, and then ensuring that it reaches the consumers in the right place and time. Right, so that is one of the possible questions that you can be asked to distinguish between supply chain and logistics. Another question I thought of asking was what are discuss two ways the internet can impact the supply chain management of a business. Now they can swap the word internet with ICT, which would make it a bit broader, but I decided to use the word internet just to narrow it down a bit. So we know the internet allows, communication using ICT tools and mechanisms, and basically it's all about, that large network that allows people to connect. So as a business, since your supply chain is a system of people, organizations, and activities where, materials move from that origin to the consumer, you definitely will need a connection, right, with those supply chain operators. So, sorry, that word should be partners, not parents. All right, so you have a connection within the supply chain between your partners, right? So those who provide for the business, those who do contracts like storing, transporting, etc. That network can be enabled through a technological means which the internet will allow. Then internet, of course, that technology allows real-time information sharing. So you can pass information on in real time. All right, I'm just going to link one of the points that I have below in terms of telemarketing and e-commerce. You know that selling your product online through e-commerce means allows direct transactions. Right? So the real-time information sharing allows when a customer uses their credit card, for instance, to pay for a goods, because of the real-time information sharing allowed within that the internet system or network, it allows the transactions to be directly and immediately processed. Right? You also have the internet allowing transportation coordination. Previously, we talked about PortNet, where we have this network of all the shipping agents, businesses, etc., that are involved in the logistics handling. So that coordination is allowed through the internet again. The internet also reduces the cost of purchases by allowing these supply chain partners better access or quicker access to the information, more availability of goods, and the pricing and technical data is also available to them. So that gives them the option now of choosing the best in terms of who supplies them and who, completes whatever services that are part of the supply chain and logistics operation. So the internet allows these benefits. All right, my next question was give two examples of how ICT is used for logistics and supply chain operations. So we're going to see here. All right. Good. All right, so I think I missed that, but I'm going to put it in at some point. So I'm just going to mention it. So we have ICT in terms of your GPS, right? We know that is the use of satellites to track and monitor your location, right? Businesses can use that, especially in the transporting, the logistics aspect, so that they could know where goods are. Delivery services, the customers, the distribution process. They can also track goods. They can track their transport, etc. Then we have GIS, which is the a similar system, but this time it allows information to be easily, um, you know, analyzed. First of all, collected and then analyzed in relation again to location, right? So you can also be able to determine routing using that GIS system. So you know, okay, you can take this route because it might be more efficient. And that helps businesses again in terms of handling their logistics more efficiently. I already mentioned Portnet, which is used by all the players in the whole logistics, like shippers, freight haulers, and government, of course, who would have control of the port facilities. So they have a network where all these players can now communicate easily and get the information that they need from that network. Right? So those are three of the main ones that we would have looked at in a note. Of course, you can come up with other ICT technology that may help in relation to supply chain operations and logistics. For instance, we do have technology used in warehousing. A lot of the robotics are used for moving goods throughout the warehouse. We do have barcode readers, right? That also allows easier storage within the warehouse and tracking of goods. We have inventory management systems with software that allows you to effectively manage your software and know and be able to track your goods, right? So these are all examples that you can list and explain how or give examples of how ICT is included in logistics and supply chain operations. The other question they can ask you is explain the difference between 1PL, 3PL, 1PL, 2PL, 3PL, and 4PL. Right now, basically, these are all what we call party logistics, right? Remember we said logistics involve handling, transporting, and the storage of goods and making sure it gets from one point to the next, right? In the time or efficiently. Now, as a business, you create the good and you can control that process. So basically, you're the 1PL. However, we find that outsourcing is done very popularly now, meaning a business may determine that, okay, we do not have the absolute advantage in this particular activity. So there might be other business who have a comparative advantage and can do it better than us. And when we contract them, it will be cheaper. And they can do it at a quality that we may not be able to handle. So that is how we have the creation of this party logistics businesses. For instance, we have 2PL. So these are businesses that will be contracted by the business for transporting the goods. So let's say a business that has a ship, right? We see goods being transported all the time regionally and even internally in our country from one point to the next. So the person who owns the ship, right, or the freight haulers, they are the ones that are the 2PLs. Those that own the trucks, the trailers to move goods from one point to the next and land. They are the 2PLs because they own the transporting means. Then we have the 3PL. Now they offer a bit more services and they are the expert logistics providers. So they offer services like warehousing, transporting, packaging, assembling, insurance, etc. Right? And Basically, these are services that the business can have chosen to handle, but as I said, because that company may be more effective in doing that task, then they will contract the business to handle those things for them. All right. So, for instance, we have businesses like FedEx. All right. They offer a lot of these services. They warehouse the goods for you. They transport it for you through their own means. They repackage it. All right. So it's basically up to that 3PL to determine how much services that they're actually going to complete for businesses. Then we have 4PLs who do a lot more of the logistics handling for a business. So added to what 3PLs may do, actually the 4PLs may not necessarily do these services, but what they do is coordinate, right? So they establish links with the business itself that would have hired them or contracted them. They also will link with all the 2PLs and 3PLs that operate for the business. So they coordinate and make sure that there's a smooth operation between all the parties in the supply chain operations. Of course, technology plays a key role here to ensure that they're properly linked to all the players. Right. My next question to you on this topic was, what are two impacts of logistics and supply chain operation and the competitiveness of businesses? So we know that logistics and supply chain, once it is handled efficiently, can improve a business competitiveness. Competitiveness means you are ranking with, the top businesses. You outperform other businesses basically in terms of what you offer, your service, your quality, your price. All right. So competitiveness is improved because you are now able to meet your demands because you have, the best quality based on the options you have cheaper materials, you have very efficient transportation because maybe you own it or you contract to 2PL so they are able to get your goods to the point that you need and at a lower cost. And this allows you now to improve on your competitiveness. The second impact is your competitive advantage is going to increase, meaning you are now going to outperform those that you compete with, right? By being able to supply quality goods at cheaper prices. Thirdly, your comparative cost advantage is also going to improve, meaning because you are now outsourcing some of these services to other businesses who you contract, they are able to do the work cheaper and at a better quality, and therefore that would pass on to you. So you have a cost advantage now that would allow you to improve your competitiveness. Right? My last question on this topic is, what is a logistic hub and basically what role do they play? So a logistic hub is a center basically, or an area that deals with the range of activities that falls within logistics and supply chain operations. So for instance, the transporting, the logistics activities in terms of assembling, packaging, inventory management, and the whole distribution of the goods. All right, so that hub basically would house businesses that do these services, right, and allow them to effectively manage the whole logistics and supply chain operation. So there are other questions that CC can ask you on logistics, of course. So I need you to go through your notes. I've posted some videos recently on the topic, and there are some areas that they can also ask, like components of the supply chain operation, components of logistics. So you should also go through those in addition to what I just discussed. All right, so I hope you are clear and have a better idea on some of the things that they can ask you. Of course, the previous that were always in the syllabus in terms of transportation modes, land, air, sea, water, and how businesses can decide on which mode is best, right? That's another aspect of the whole topic of distribution. Yeah, so you can, overlook those also, right? But I just decided to focus on the newer components of that topic. All right, so let's move on. All right, so this is a 2009 question. It is based on marketing, right? So the question says Miss Mac produces a confectionery locally known as fudge and sells it door to door. She uses the brand name Exotic Fudge. Define it on branding. So branding is basically a business creating a very strong perception of their company or their product, right, or service, and basically creating an image in the mind of its consumers. And in order to do so, they are going to combine certain elements such as a logo, a name, which might be incorporated with the logo, right? The whole design, so they put a design component to that brand. They may have a slogan or saying. They have symbols, etc. that is attached. Even the color coding and all of that can also be part of that design, right, for your brand. Branding, of course, part B has benefits, right? So a business, of course, would be better able to differentiate itself from other businesses, right? So when a customer sees your product or associated with your service, they can know, okay, this is related or associated with that business. So it differentiates you. It also allows customers to easily recognize you as a business, right? Because that is the perception your brand puts out there. Customers can become more loyal to you because of branding, because branding is often associated with, quality, right? So customers can be more loyal and trusting of your product because of, all that effort you put into creating that strong image. And of course, it helps to increase more sales once you are able to retain customers and always have them returning to your business. And of course, your competitive advantage is going to improve because now you are able to put your product or service at a level, that ranks above those you compete with. Then we have explain the 4 P's of marketing. You should be very familiar with this. The 4 P's: product, price, place, promotion. So product, of course, looks at the good that you are creating, right? Or that service that you're offering, and how you decide to brand it, package it, design it so that it meets the needs of your consumers. Pricing looks at being able to determine what is the best value that you're going to place on your product. And that is determined by, of course, different methods, in particular, looking at your costing, looking at the kind of objectives you may have, and the image you want to put out there of your product or service. So you have different methods of pricing. Then we have place. Place looks at how you distribute your product, what method or channel you're going to use. So you can use direct channels or indirect channels to get your product to the consumer. And then we have promotion, which looks at how are you going to ensure that persons know of your product? How are you going to increase your sales? What methods are you going to use to get people to buy your good or service even more? And part D says suggest 2 benefits that Miss Mark is likely to enjoy by selling her fudge from door to door. Of course, selling door to door is a direct method. So, one, she can increase her chances of building a better relationship with a customer, and that can lead to another benefit of customer loyalty. And she can also use that method to gain more useful market research information that can help her to improve her product and, a whole customer service, right? So as a direct method, it gives her those benefits. Um, and of course, that can increase her sales in the long run. Identify two methods of distribution other than door to door that Miss Mark could use. So, of course, door to door is a direct method. A couple other direct methods that she can use. She can set up a little retail shop, and customers can come to her and buy her confectionery. Of course, it may not just be a food shop. She may have other things that she may want to diversify into, right? She may even look at a mail order business so persons can send in their orders, right? Although a more practical thing might also be using online means to sell a product, right? Of course, she has to look into the cost of that, considering that it's a small business, right? Indirect methods that she can use other middle person to help sell her products. So there might be retail shops or supermarkets, as we often see confectionaries being sold and marketed for other businesses, vending machines that would accommodate that also. So she have either direct or indirect methods that she can use. All right, so that was just a little snippet of a marketing topic that you can review on. Right, so this one is based on the finance section of the syllabus. So they looked here at individual who lost a job as a supervisor for the department store. She's given a reasonable redundancy package, which means it's a benefit package for persons who would have been relieved of their job, maybe because they're no longer needed. The business did some expanding, or maybe they sold the business, merged with another business, and now that task is no longer needed. So the redundancy package is basically going to be a benefit package, financial package that the employee would receive once they are relieved of that position. So she needs to live on a carefully monitored budget, right? Because now she has no job. They find the term personal budgeting. Now, a personal budget is basically a financial plan that an individual would use to allocate one, their personal income, so how much money you earn for that month, right? Your expenses, how much you spend on the things that you require, as a food, transportation, etc. Savings, how much are you going to allocate towards saving each month? So money put aside for future use. And debt repayment, how much monies are allocated to repaying any loans that you may have. Right? Of course, part B, what are two ways in which you could benefit from budgeting? But budgeting allows you, of course, to avoid, well, of course, first of all, to track your spending, right? To see how you use that income, and it allows you to avoid overspending, right? So you are able to monitor what you spend so that you don't, spend more than you need to. It allows you to save, of course, because that is part of the plan. It allows you to make better financial decisions. So if, for instance, you know you have such amount left, right? Or you decided that expenses will be this amount each month, then you would know what financial decisions to make based on the fact that you are aware of what your income and expenses are. You prepare for emergencies because you are allocating money towards savings again, and it makes you more goal oriented, right? Because when you're planning, remember you're setting goals. Some might be short term, some might be medium term, some might be long term, as to how you can better manage your finances. Right, part C says the following saving options are available to Mary Jo. So, question: credit unions, commercial banks. State one advantage and one disadvantage of each saving option to Mary Jo. So credit unions, as we know, are businesses set up by members, and they offer financial services just like banks do, but it's more tailored to helping the members in that regard. So one advantage of saving with a credit union is that one, remember you're an owner, right? And by saving with a credit union, you're actually going to be benefiting your business, which you're a part ownership of, and helping to grow that business. So you are actually not just saving, but contributing to your investment as a business owner, right? So that is also good, and it opens avenue, of course, for you to do further business, let's say take loans, etc., since that would be used as equity in terms of taking a loan, right? Saving with a commercial bank. Oh, well, let's look at the advantage first. So one advantage of saving with a commercial bank, of course, you generally have a little more interest than the credit union in terms of your savings, right? So that is one advantage you may get um, from saving with a commercial bank, right? Of course, commercial banks are companies. You don't have that ownership, so that's a disadvantage there. You're not an owner, so there is no um, dividends to be received since you're not buying, putting any shares into that, right? Whereas with a credit union, you have dividends due to the fact that you'd have bought shares to become a member. In terms of disadvantage of the credit unions, they are smaller businesses, of course, and as I said, the interest may not be very high. The investment benefit may not be very high either because of the whole objective of credit unions as a cooperative, right? Part D, she wants to use her redundancy money to invest in the stock market or to purchase a house. Describe the role of the stock market. So the stock market is basically a place or a public market that exists for issuing, buying, and selling of stocks or other securities. Right? So you can sell and buy and sell shares on the stock market, also called the stock exchange market, and it allows public companies to make that offer to interested investors. Now, they ask for one advantage and one disadvantage of investing in the stock market or purchasing a house. So, if you purchase stocks, one advantage of that is you actually get to grow your money, and you also have voting rights because you're an owner of a company. You are diversifying because you have the ability to buy stocks, not just in one company but other companies of different nature. And it's more liquid, meaning you can easily sell your stock, and especially when the value has increased, and collect more. Buying a house is also a good way of investing because there are two ways of investing, right? But buying a house, in terms of an advantage, it's a fixed asset, and the house comes with land, so that appreciates and that value can increase, right? Which is a good way to grow your equity. You can also use that asset as a means to, let's say, um, collateral for further investment. Take a loan and probably increase, right? So there are potentials there in terms of putting a house, right? In terms of disadvantage, it's not as liquid as the stocks because it may take a longer time to sell in terms of liquidity, right? Even though, of course, you have the advantage of increasing value so that you can get more than what you bought it at, but that takes a while. Sometimes it takes years upon years, right? You see a lot of people putting their property um, up for sale by using middle persons like real estate agents, etc. And a lot of times it takes a lot of time, and then using a real estate agent means you have to put more into, more funds into it because you have to pay them a commission, right, to sell it for you. So the disadvantage is even though you are investing and you stand to make profits also from the sale of it, it takes a longer time because it's a less liquid asset, right? Because it's a fixed asset. Stock market is a bit more liquid and allows you to sell much quicker. Right, so that was a um, finance based topic. So let's move on. Right, so this is a production topic again, mixed with a bit of technology in it. Right, so we have distinguish between capital intensive production and labor intensive production and give one example of each form of production. So, capital intensive production is where businesses or industries require a larger amount of investment or financial capital investment in order to make a good or service, meaning a lot of fixed assets. So, for instance, telecommunication, like digital line, you notice they have a lot of wirings they have to run. They need the poles, they need the equipment in terms of ICT and all of that to set up so that the service can be offered. Oil refining, you need the rigs, you need pipelines, etc. Factories, right? So these are some industries that are very capital intensive because they use a higher percentage of fixed assets within that industry than some businesses would need. Then we have labor intensive, where the production again within these industries need a higher percentage of labor than it does fixed assets. So, for instance, we have the service sector, right? Most of the time they would use more labor. Nursing, fruit picking, for instance, you need more labor. Although you do have machines that may do that, but in some cases, you need the manual human labor, right? So that is the difference there with some examples. Employees must be technologically competent to succeed in today's workplace. List 4 technological competencies that today's employees need. Well, you definitely need some productivity related competencies. So, in terms of use of Microsoft Word, use of spreadsheet, you also need, you notice that everything is going towards a social media kind of technology. So you need competencies in communicating via these mediums, right? So that you can better able, um, you know, create contact. Um, Technological competency, you also need to be able to troubleshoot. So let's say there's an issue with your computer or there's an issue with a software you're using, example, being able to troubleshoot those are very important too, right? So technologically, those are some competencies that you may need. I'm sure you could come up with a couple others. You can use your own job, for instance, to determine what technological competencies you may need. All right, use of the internet, the use of productivity tools, PowerPoint related tools, those are competencies that we find employees use a lot in the workplace. State 2 disadvantages of modern technology. Of course, modern technology causes loss of jobs, right? Because they replace human labor, and that can lead to some social issues like person's standard of living dropping, poverty increasing, because of unemployment, right? Um, Modern technology also have the disadvantage because it causes persons to be more dependent on the technology and less on their own thinking. So critical thinking decreases a lot, and persons become very dependent on technology to do some of the creative things. So we find that creativity and innovativeness may reduce a bit, um, whereas more emphasis is placed or dependency is on technology. Modern technology comes with some issues for the environment too, in terms of pollution, right? And damage to the environment. So that is also another problem. Two ways modern technology increases or improves the efficiency of businesses. So we have a lot of points below there. Communication is more effective than, without modern technology. Look at the internet, for instance. You can easily communicate and very quickly send information from one person to the other. More efficient manufacturing techniques. So look at the factories today, right? You have robotics and all of that create products, more automated systems. There's more accuracy and less wastage. Inventory management is more efficient now. Ordering systems more efficient, and you develop new innovative approaches. And marketing and promotion has become more effective also. All right, so those are some benefits related to technology making businesses more efficient. All right, so this is another finance related. So defined as savings. Saving is money that is set aside for future use, money that is retained from your income, right, for future use. List two methods of saving. Well, we could use the last question we just linked. You can use credit unions, you can use commercial banks, and then we have SUSU and also a method used for saving. Identify two sources of short-term finances and two sources of long-term. So short-term, of course, would be financing in the shorter period, right, between a year, 2, 3, right? So you have short-term loans, um, you have credit cards, you have your savings, right? Those are short-term means of financing. Long-term means of financing, you have long-term loans, mortgages, debentures. Those are sources of long-term finances, right? And you're dealing here with more like development banks. Stock market is also long-term financing, right? So those are some of the institutions linked to those sources. For the short-term finances, you can use credit unions and commercial banks and lending agencies. Those are institutions linked to short-term financing. All right. So I would recommend, in terms of naming the financing, you can also link the institution to it. All right, just to make sure. Explain the role of central bank as an advisor to government. So basically, central bank, um, well, is put in place by the state to operate, well, to more monitor and regulate the financial sector, right? So, as an advisor for government, remember we said central bank banks for government, so they're the banker. So, if government has any financial related decisions, then they would advise them based on, of course, the status of their accounts. Also, if government has to enter any negotiations in terms of international financial agreements, whether it be with IMF, World Bank, etc., central bank will be a part of that negotiating. Central bank also ensures that any monetary policies created by government are also, they give input there, and they ensure that it's carried out, and that it's promoting, an effective financial system for the country, right? So they would advise government on any issues that may arise in terms of monetary policies that may be causing chaos in the financial system. Central bank is a lender of last resort. What does that mean? Central bank provides loans, not necessarily as a main service, but last resort. So if government or commercial banks need a loan, central bank would provide that but as a last resort. Right? Identify two types of monetary transaction that can be conducted within the banking system without the use of cash. So we have credit cards. We have the remember we talked about the sorry, I just lost my thoughts. In terms of using your cell phone, right, to conduct transactions, we see a lot of apps now being created to allow persons to make payments without the use of cash. Right? You can also use a checkbook, which will be linked, of course, to an account to make that transaction. So those are some of the examples. You can use also EFT, electronic funds transfer, right, to make payments for a transaction. Right. All right, so this one is on government and some other related information here. So, explain what is meant by the statement government is a regulator of business, giving two examples to support that. So, government regulates businesses, meaning government puts laws and legislations in place to control business activity. Right? So, a business is allowed to be set up in a state. They have some level of freedom, right, especially in a mixed economy, to determine, how they operate, etc. But government as public sector still has a role to regulate and control business activity. So, for instance, they would put laws in place. One example is laws relating to environmental protection. We have laws relating to price control. We have laws relating to product quality, right? We have laws relating to consumer and how they're treated. We have laws related to labor, how they treat employees. We have laws related to registration and taxation. So there are many examples that you can use, right, in terms of how government regulates a business. State three purposes of taxation. So on the slide here, I have a couple that would have been shared with you in the notes. Tax can be used to reduce pollution. Tax can be used to discourage an unhealthy lifestyle. So you tax that particular product very heavily to allow persons to not use it as much. Tax can be used to protect local industries, as we talked about last week. Tax can be used to achieve greater equality of wealth and income. So you tax those who have more, and then you use that to help those who have less. Tax can be used to improve the balance of payment, because remember, if you're importing too much, your balance of payment would be negative. So the tax can be used to reduce imports and allow it to be more balanced. And tax can be used to control spending in an economy. So, for instance, if there is high inflation, then tax can be used to kind of deter persons from spending, right? And that would kind of level off the inflation that is occurring. Part C says, discuss each of the following consumer protection legislation and show how they benefit consumers. So we have the food and drug standards. They are basically legislation that protect the public in terms of food, cosmetics, the pharmaceutical drugs, etc., and ensuring that they are safe to use and they are labeled appropriately and packaged appropriately, etc. All right, so in every country you have institutions that implement the food and drug standards. So you have consumer protection office, you have Bureau of Standards, right? So they ensure that monitoring is done and the laws are implemented. Then we have the hire purchase laws. So there must be a hire purchase contract established, and this will ensure that the buyer and the seller know exactly what agreement they're entering into. All right. All right. So I do. All right. So I do hope that this helps you a bit and that it kind of opens your eyes to some of the things that you need to look at. You have to study everything, so I hope that you are really studying and ensuring that you are ready for exam this coming week. Any questions that you may have on a past paper that you may be looking at, you can free to send your question to me so I could send some feedback to you. Alright. So I want to wish everybody all the best, and please go through Google Classroom. There are many past paper questions. There are the quizzes that I post, right? Redo them, and don't wait for after the exam to say, if I had known. Use the time now that you have left so that you can get that grade 1 that you want and that I want for you. Right? So all the best to everyone.